Hey, how's it going? So, OpenTofu, that is the fully open source alternative to HashiCorp Terraform, is now available on version 1.9.0, released just a few days ago on Friday, January the 10th, 2025. And its main new feature is this provider iterator for each. So, this marks quite a departure compared to HashiCorp Terraform. This is a feature that people had requested, and I believe that HashiCorp said that they weren't going to do it for various reasons, but now it's in OpenTofu. So that marks a very different philosophy. Let's have a quick look at the docs, and then I'm going to show you on the command line in the terminal how this works. So they're just saying here that it's been 1 year since OpenTofu went GA, which was with version 1.6. That was a year ago. They're now on 1.9.0. It includes the provider iteration for each, which I'm going to show you in this video. Also includes some other features like the exclude flag and various improvements and options and stuff like that. So let's look at the more detailed kind of release notes. And what we got here is, let's have a look at provider iteration. It's the first thing here. So here is the whole point of it. It's supposed to stop you duplicating your code, because you're able now to iterate over several providers. Now, you may remember in a provider you typically will mention a single region. So you can now use the same code over multiple regions. For example, a primary region and a backup region. You don't need separate Terraform code for that. You can now do it with one set of code. And here's how you do it. They say here you set up, for example, the variable regions of type setString. And it also supports something called disabled regions, which is something I don't fully understand. I'll let you read that yourself later. And you can see here, this is where you got this iteration, because you like each dot value for the region. Now they're recommending here that what you do is you set up a module and you reference the source of the module, and in there you'll say, and here's where you're iterating over the provider, several providers, each with one region, AWS.by region, each key. And in each you need to sort of extract this from the variable whilst also excluding any disabled regions that you have. So let's take a look. I'll show you how this works. So I've got a file here called terraform.tf. Let's take a look at this. And what you see on the screen, the first half of the file, is pretty much what was shown on that document I just showed you, except I've made some additions. So for example, variable regions, I put US East 1, US West 2, as if they could be, for example, your primary and your disaster recovery type setup, which makes sense, right? That often you want to have the same things in DR compared to the primary. Variable disabled regions, I've left it blank, haven't put anything there. I've then done the usual Terraform required providers block. I've pinned it to the latest version. And then here you got provider AWS, and I've done it just like they said in the document. So we've got this alias and region and for each var.regions. Okay, so let's take a look. And oops, let me just scroll up. And this is the rest of it. This is the rest of the code. So I've actually got sort of two resources here. One's actually a data source, and the other is a regular resource. Let's look at the resource. So I actually wanted to create an EC2 instance, and in here you got provider is, we need to iterate over them. So that's why I've got these two here. This is the interesting part here. I've said I want to use an Ubuntu AMI, which I've set up as a data source, and I've got this each key part in there. And the reason I've done that is because AMIs are per region. It's not the same AMI across several different regions. So if we go back up here and look at the data source, that I've created one called AWS_AMI of that type, called it Ubuntu, and I've said here that whatever is owned by Canonical, and is version 22.04 of Ubuntu. And then The way that this works is it will take the one from the relevant region and put it in here. So let's see if this works. I'm going to quit out of here. And if you're not familiar with tofu, the commands are very similar to regular Terraform. So first we're going to do a tofu init to initialize the back end. Even the output to the screen is very similar to Terraform. This is my first time using tofu, so I actually didn't know what to expect, but it turns out to be very, very similar. So there we go. Very, very similar to what you might have seen before. So initialize fine, let's clear the screen, let's do a tofu plan. And here you'll be able to see exactly how this works. You see here, there you go, there's a data source. Let's scroll back up again because that was all very quick. So you can see that it's trying to create these data source, and it's managed to find the key US East 1, US West 2, and in both cases successfully determined to create AMI ID, and then it goes about trying to create the instances. Well, this is a plan after all, but for the instance of US East 1, it's going to use the AMI ending with 463D, which is this one here, which was the one from the data source for the same region, US East 1. And if you scroll down, then for the US West 2, you're basically getting the same thing. It's going to use the relevant AMI. So this allows you, with just a single piece of code, well, I say a single piece of code, but this allows you to, using your, previously you would have had this data source and you would have had this resource, but you would have had to replicate this for each region, and now you only need to do it once. But what you have to do is you do have to have this sort of provider for each statements in there, and then it will work. And that's it. I'm not going to bother doing the apply. It will actually give an error because I don't have my VPC set up. It does raise a question though. This is all very well that we have this new provider iteration, and some people have been asking for this. But for those who haven't been asking, is it recommended? Should you use it? That's something for you to figure out. Me personally, I do think there's a danger of making your code too dry and trying to have the least numbers of lines of code. I don't believe that in infrastructure as code that's necessarily an advantage to have. This has now become coupled code. I actually think it would be better to have it decoupled. You don't know what might happen in a disaster. What happens, you know, could you have problems updating your Terraform code if your primary region is down? I actually think it's better to keep your infrastructure decoupled. I personally prefer that. So for me, this is not so useful, but it's only just come out, and it will be very interesting to see the use cases that people are going to start using this for, and also any potential improvements. So that's all I want to talk about today. Hope you enjoyed this video. Take care.